Okay, I'm going to run through the function notation worksheet that I posted on Canvas. So if you haven't seen this worksheet yet, you should go right above in Canvas and right above the homework 7. I think a couple things above homework 7 assignment. You'll find this worksheet. Print it off, and probably be more beneficial just to do the worksheet first and then come back and watch the video. So here we go. So this says g of 10, which means, and again, this is read as g of 10, which means there's a function that's entitled g, and I'm inputting into that function 10. So I go up here and look for g. Okay, there's g, so that's the one I'm plugging into. So I'm just going to plug a 10 in there, so that would be negative 3 times 10 plus 1, which of course negative 30 plus 1 is negative 29. Next one is f of 3. So then I go to the f function, and that would be 3 squared plus 7, which means 9 plus 7, or 16. And this is h of negative 2. So again, this says go and find the h function. That's not h, that's not h. This one's h. So that would be 12 over negative 2, which would be negative 6. And then here's j of 7, so I go over to the j function, and that would be 2 times 7 plus 9. 2 times 7 is 14, 14 plus 9 is 23. Well, now here we're getting a little bit trickier. So h of a, but again, what this means is a is the input, so what is the output? So I go to the h function. The h function is 12 divided by x. So I'm replacing x with a, so this would just be 12 divided by a. And of course, I'd simplify it as much as I can, but that's as far as I can simplify it. Here's the g function, so I'm going to g, and this would be negative 3. And in place of x, I'm going to put b plus c plus 1. Of course, again, I've simplified if I can, so that would be a negative 3b minus 3c plus 1. And that's as much as I can do. I can't simplify because there's no like terms there. Now this one's a really tricky one. It says f of h of x. So again, but notice what happens is the x has been replaced with an h of x. But the outside function is f. So I'm going to go and find f first. So f is something squared plus 7. And this says to put inside the what I'm inputting into the f function is the h function. So I go up to h, and I'm going to put that whole thing in there. So that would be a 12 over x right there. Of course, that can be simplified to 144 over x squared plus 7. Okay, now we're going, in this case, they're supposed to find x, given that the output is 16. So this is the case where I know the output of the function, but I don't know what was input. So this is the g function, which means this first one here. So I know that somehow I plugged in something in for x and got out 16. That's what this is telling me, right? So I need to go find out what x is. So that would be negative 3x is equal to 15, which means x is equal to negative 5. So g of negative 5 equals 16, apparently. And here's the same idea. Find 8x if h of x equals negative 2. So I go find h of x, that's 12 over x. So that means that 12 over x is equal to negative 2, which means 12 is equal to negative 2x, which implies negative 6 is equal to x. So I plugged in negative 6. Can't see that negative there. Plugged in negative 6 and got out negative 2. And then finally find f of x equal to 23. So I go back up, and where's the f? That's x squared plus 7. So that means that x squared plus 7 equals 23, which implies that x squared is equal to, if I subtract 7 from both sides, I get 16. So therefore x is equal to 2 or negative 2, because I squared, I'm sorry, no, not 2 or negative 2, 4 or negative 4, because I square rooted both sides there. And then I'll box that just to be a good, show good example. Boxing all of my answers, being a good student. Teacher, be proud of me. Okay. Now this next one, part 2, says translate the following statements into coordinate points. This is one of those questions that I love because it's super easy if you understand the concept, but impossible if you don't understand the concept. So again, if we understand this notation, this means that I plugged in -1 and got out 1. So if I want to translate that information into a coordinate point, that means the x coordinate was -1 because that's what I plugged in, and 1 was the output, which means that's the y coordinate. So this is merely telling me that I plugged in -1, got out 1, which means -1, 1 is a point on the graph. So this one would tell me that 2, 7 is a point on the graph. This would tell me that 1, -1 is a point on the graph. And this tells me that 3, 9 is a point on the graph. Okay, this is a little bit trickier because now we're looking at a graph instead of a equation. And so this is saying find f. So this means I plugged in -4 for x and got out what for y. So in the graph, what I'm going to do is go over to -4, which is right here, go up and find the point that's associated with -4. So that point right there is the point -4, 2. So it looks like when I plug in -4, a 2 came out. So I put a 2 there. Whereas this says I plugged in a 0 and got out something. So it looks like when I plug in 0, I get out 0. So that would be 0. This one says I plugged in 3 and got out something. So I go out to x equals 3. And that's the point that's connected with 3. So it looks like I have about -1.8-ish, maybe. Yeah. And then finally, what is f of -5? So I go back to -5, and it looks like the y value is 0 at that point. So this says find x when f of x equals 2. So I go up to, so that this is telling me that y is 2. So that would be there, but it's also right there, isn't it? So x has 2 possible answers here. It could be -4 because of this point here. There's a -4 right there. But it also could have been about -0.8. And then finally, x when f of x equals 0, so that we've already hit one of those, that one and that one. So x would be equal to -5 or 0 when y is 0. Okay, find an equation of linear function given by these 2 points. Now remember, these are just tell me points. So this is saying that 1, 6 is a point on the graph, and 4, -3 is a point on the graph. And we're going to talk more about finding linear equations, but I think most of you have been exposed to it, so it's a good little reminder, kind of, and also a preview of where we're headed. So if you remember, slope can be found by the change in y over the change in x. This little symbol is the delta, which means, well, it's not really delta, but it's supposed to be a delta. That means change. So we're comparing the change in y to the change in x. So how much did the y's change? They changed from 6 to -3. That would be a -9. And they changed from 1 to 4. That would be a +3, which would end up being -3. So the slope of this line is -3. And there's a couple of different ways to write the equation line. Most of you probably remember y equals mx plus b. And that -3, of course, is the m, because that's slope. And the b is the y-intercept, which we don't have the y-intercept, but we could certainly find it. This says that I'm going down 3. Every time I go to the right one, I go up, or I'm sorry, every time I go to the right one, I go down 3, right? That's the idea. So that means if I was to go to the left one, I would go up 3. That makes sense. It gives you the same thing. So here I'm at a 1, 6. So think about this. If I'm at over 1, up 6, if I go to the left one, that means I go up 3 from there. So the y-intercept is going to be 9. So that would be y equals -3x plus 9. And if you want to check and make sure that your equation is right, you could plug these numbers in and make sure they make them true, right? Because if I plug in 1 for x and 6 for y, it should be a true equation. And negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, plus 9 is 6, and sure enough, it is a true equation. Okay, but we're going to talk more about finding these guys in the days to come. Okay, finally, number 5 says swine flu is attacking Porkopolis. That's funny. The function below determines how many people have swine, where t equals time in days and s equals number of people in thousands. Ooh, number of people in thousands. So find s of 4. So that's just a function notation. So I plug in a 4 here, and 9 times 4 is 36. 36 minus 4 is 32. Okay, so s of 4 is 32. What does f of 4 mean? Well, first of all, because s is in the number of people in thousands, it does mean 32,000, right? But the number of people in thousands, we have to read back here, and it says the function below determines how many people have swine flu. So this would mean this producing the 32 would mean that there's 32,000 people infected. That's what the 32 means. Again, the 32,000, because this says it's in thousands of people, and it's people infected because that tells us what the function determines. Okay? Now it says find t when s of t equals 23. So that would mean I would go 9t minus 4 is equal to 23, which means 9t is equal to, if I had 4 to both sides, that'd be 27. So t is equal to 3. What does s of t equal 23 mean? That means that, so this is telling me that at a certain time, and we found out it was 3 days, right? But at a certain time, there will be 23,000 people infected. And by solving for t, we found out that after 3 days, 23,000 people were infected. So then finally this is graph the function. So if I graph the function, I'd go over, oops, we got a weird line thing going on here. Sorry about that. There should be a line kind of right through there. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So y-intercept of 4 over 1 up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It looks something like that. It's a nice linear equation. All right, so that's the solutions for that worksheet. Please let me know if you have any questions.